Ray lay in bed, unmoving, eyes sharp as he silently counted the people entering the room, one after another. No one spoke. No one needed to. The atmosphere alone was heavy enough to make the walls feel like they were closing in. Each person moved with rigid precision, forming a line along the wall near Gary's bed, their postures disciplined like trained soldiers. It was eerily unnatural, chilling. Sylvia, Gary, Ian, Dan, Monk, Kyle, Martha, and the red-haired twins, Sloth and Badger. Every person Ray had grown close to stood before him now, expressions tight with anxiety, dread pooling behind their eyes like a storm cloud ready to burst. Something was coming. They all felt it. Ray broke the silence. "What's going on?" The door creaked open a moment later. Sir Kay entered, his footsteps sharp, measured. Without a word, he reached into his coat and retrieved a small, metallic spider-shaped device. He tossed it lightly toward the door, where it scuttled up and embedded itself into the wood. A faint, circular shimmer of magic pulsed outward. "No one can eavesdrop now," Sir Kay said, turning to the room. "What I'm about to say is classified. But after long deliberation, Wilfred and I have agreed. It's time you all knew the truth." Tension gripped the room like a vice. Sir Kay continued. "Two students were nearly killed in a recent attack. But you should know, they were lucky to escape alive." All eyes turned to the red-haired twins. "Sloth, Badger," Sir Kay said with a nod. "Please tell Sylvia what you saw." Sylvia stepped forward, her usual poise dimmed by the gravity of the moment. "There were 3 of them," Sloth said grimly. "All masked," Badger added. "Red masks. Identical." Sir Kay's gaze shifted to Ray and Gary. "You two got a closer look. You saw the face beneath one of the masks, didn't you?" Gary swallowed hard. "It was Lancy, the Squire Master." Gasps erupted. Shock rippled like thunder across the group. A few students began to speak at once, voices rising. Sir Kay clapped once, loud and commanding. Silence returned. Sylvia raised her hand. "Was it the Dark Guild?" Sir Kay shook his head. "No, that would have been easier to deal with. What you're facing now is much worse." He paused. "They're called purebloods." A chill swept through the room. Just the name left an eerie weight in its wake. 11 years ago, Sir Kay said, voice slow and deliberate, a prophecy came from the divine being. It foretold that a boy with red hair would rise as the kingdom's savior. He let that sink in. Knights were dispatched across the continent. Every red-haired child was tested, brought to Avrion if they showed even the slightest potential. Among those children were Kyle, Ian, Sloth, Badger. His eyes met Ray's. "And you?" Ray's stomach dropped. A cold knot twisted in his gut. "But the prophecy had a second part," Sir Kay said, and his tone grew darker. "It claimed that this same child would also bring about the destruction of the world." The room fell utterly silent. 2 prophecies. One savior, one destroyer, and no way to tell which was true. For the first time in history, 2 divine messages clashed, Sir Kay continued. The result? Division, conflict, and the birth of the purebloods, a faction that believes the red-haired child must die before he can destroy the world. Dan scoffed. "And what does that have to do with us?" Sylvia turned on him. "Are you serious?" "Kyle, Ian, Ray, they're our friends." Martha gently pulled her back, placing a calming hand on her arm. Sir Kay nodded. "Whether you wanted to be involved or not, you're in this now. And I'm sorry. Until now, the purebloods kept their opposition to protests. But this was their first attack, and it won't be the last." He turned to the twins. Sloth and Badger were being protected in secret by the lurker. But Ray, Kyle, Ian had no such guardian. His gaze lingered on Ray. "I hoped that surrounding you with strong allies would be enough. I was wrong." Ray stared back, expression unreadable. "Ray," Sir Kay said, "you are now the leading candidate for the Child of Prophecy." Ray's heart skipped. "What?" "You survived 3 life-threatening incidents. Your body heals at a rate that defies explanation. Medical reports don't lie. The other knights have seen it. And now, so have the purebloods." Ray clenched his fists under the blanket. "They think it's divine, but it's not." He could feel the truth burning within him. That red aura that swirled through his veins, different from Ki, different from magic. They didn't know. His hair wasn't always red. He wasn't even always human. He was a dragon. But if he said aloud, they'd think he'd lost his mind. "I'm not the one," he whispered. Sir Kay's voice hardened. "That doesn't matter. They believe you are. And that puts everyone around you in danger." The warning hit like a hammer. "From now on, watch your backs. Watch each other's backs." Sir Kay moved toward the door, pulling the spider device free. The magic shimmer vanished. "You're just leaving us?" Dan shouted. "What about guards?" "If we post guards, the pure bloods will know who we're protecting," Sir Kay replied. "And we still don't know who among the knights we can trust. We send the wrong person, and we may as well sign your death warrants." It was like a veil had been torn away. The academy, the place that was supposed to be their sanctuary, wasn't safe anymore. Sir Kay opened the door and left. One by one, the others followed. Faces pale, eyes wary. Only Ray and Gary remained. For days, Ray stayed at Gary's side while he recovered, guilt gnawing at him. They spoke little, but their silence said everything. 2 weeks later, they were discharged. When they returned to their dorm room, something unexpected sat on the table. A single envelope. Gary picked it up. His name was written on the front in elegant black ink, sealed with the Academy's official crest. Ray watched as Gary's fingers hesitated over the seal. Something told him this letter would change everything. Gary opened the envelope without a word. The parchment inside crackled softly as he unfolded it, his eyes scanning the contents line by line. But he didn't move, not even to breathe. He stood frozen, back straight, the letter clenched in his trembling hands. Minutes passed. Long, silent, suffocating minutes. Ray watched from his bed, an uneasy chill prickling the air. Gary wasn't just reading. He was unraveling. Whatever the message said, it had seized him completely. No one in the room spoke. Even the usual distant echoes from the Academy's halls seemed to quiet, as if the very building understood this moment demanded reverence. Then, finally, "Hey man, are you okay?" Dan asked. The words shattered the fragile stillness. Gary flinched and bolted. The letter slipped from his fingers, fluttering in the air before landing with a soft pap beside Dan's feet. It rested there, like something sacred and dangerous all at once. A hush fell over the room. Someone tried to lighten the mood with a nervous joke, probably just a breakup or something, but it fell flat. No one laughed. Everyone felt it. This was no trivial matter. Except Dan. Without hesitation, he stooped, picked up the letter, and unfolded it. "No!" Monk shouted. "Don't read that. You remember what happened last time." "Last time?" Ray asked, glancing around. But no one met his eyes. He had no idea what they meant, only that something about this moment felt familiar. Heavy. Dan waved off the warning and scanned the letter. Then he froze. Dan, the loudmouth, the joker, the guy who always had something to say, stood absolutely still, lips parted, eyes locked on the paper. He swallowed hard. Martha stepped forward, her voice barely a whisper. "What does it say?" Dan slowly refolded the letter and set it on the table. "This isn't something we should have read. Someone needs to find Gary. Now." Everyone exchanged worried glances. The group split up without another word. Ray searched through the mess hall, the training fields, the meditation chambers. Nothing. Eventually, his feet carried him toward the rooftop, a place where students went when they needed space to think or escape. The door creaked open. There, silhouetted against the setting sun, stood Gary, rigid, silent, staring out over the Academy's vast grounds and the city beyond. Ray stepped out quietly, letting the door close behind him. The wind tugged at Gary's hair, golden strands whipping in the breeze. His shoulders were slumped, not with exhaustion, but with grief. Ray didn't speak. He simply walked up beside him and gave him a quiet pat on the back, staring out at the view. They stood like that for a while. No words, just silence and pain. Then Gary's voice came, hoarse and broken. "You want to know what the letter said, don't you?" Ray didn't reply. He didn't need to. It was about Amy. Ray's heart dropped. Gary's little sister, spirited, curious, always cheering them on during training sessions. He remembered her laughter, her wide-eyed fascination with the world. Memories hit him like stones. She's dead. The words were barely above a whisper, and yet they crashed like thunder. Gary clenched his fists, his knuckles white, his fingernails cutting into skin. Blood welled and dripped, but he didn't notice. She died at Roland Academy. A duel with some noble's son. They said it was an accident. His voice trembled with barely contained rage. And then they tried to pay my family off. Money, Ray. They offered money, as if that could replace her. Ray's jaw tensed. It was the same story, again and again. The powerful buried their sins beneath gold, and the poor were expected to swallow their grief in silence. No trial, no punishment. He just walked away, because she was just a commoner. Just Amy. Gary's voice cracked. I'm going to kill him, Ray. Whoever did this, I'll find him, and I'll make him pay. Ray didn't stop him. He couldn't. He understood. That anger, wild, cold, blinding, that came from losing someone to a world that didn't care. Ray lived with that every day. Gary turned to him suddenly, eyes bloodshot, face streaked with dried tears. You have powers, right? Real ones. I saw what you did in the forest. Fire. Summoning. You're more than just a swordsman. He grabbed Ray's shoulders, his blood-stained hands clutching desperately. Help me. Use your magic. Show the Master Knights. Get transferred to Roland Academy. Please. I need you with me. We can find out who did this together. Ray hesitated. The offer was tempting. Roland Academy was rumored to be where the divine being resided. Going there aligned with his own goals. But he couldn't just leave. Not yet. There were still too many unanswered questions. The Red Door, the Dragon Knight's tomb, the truth about himself. And still, part of him wanted to tell Gary everything. He deserved that much. Gary had saved his life, stood by him when no one else would. If there was anyone he could trust, it was him. I can't, Gary, not yet, Ray said softly. My powers, they aren't normal. They're not even human. Gary's gaze faltered, but he didn't press. He simply turned away, the ache in his chest still burning. Understand, he murmured. Ray stepped forward. But listen, there's another way. Gary glanced back. The All-Kingdom Tournament, Ray said. Every academy will be there, including Roland. Nobles, knights, students, everyone. If we can't go to them directly, we make them come to us. Gary stood still for a moment. Then, slowly, he nodded, and a faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Thanks, Ray. For the first time in a long while, it looked like hope had returned to Gary's eyes. But beneath it burned something darker. A storm was coming, and Ray had just promised to stand in the eye.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
Gary started to distance himself from the group, and the others hardly ever saw him outside of training. When he came back to the room each night, he would always be covered in sweat. Sometimes, Ray would spot him at the training ground practicing. The others had bugged Dan many times about the contents of the letter, pet-suring to give up the details of what was inside, and eventually, he gave in and told the rest. Now that everyone knew Gary was going through a tough time, they decided to give up on bothering him, allowing him the space and time to rest and rediscover himself. But to be honest, everyone was pretty busy themselves. The Avrian Academy tournament was only a month away. There were a lot of prizes up for grabs, but only the top 5 people could go on to take part in the All-Kingdom tournament. Still, Ray wasn't too bothered about the tournament. Before, his original plan was to make it into the top 10, for he wanted to keep the old man happy. That should have been a high enough position. But there were too many things that happened. Ray had promised to help Gary. Furthermore, it was most likely that Gary was training to be in the top 5. Now, Ray just wanted to be there as support for him, to keep his word. That day, at their Black Knight training session, Sir Kay had given the 4 of them a nice surprise. He brought the equipment from the Pure Blood members. All the weapons and armor that was laid out were all intermediate class. It's not everything that was there, but a lot of it was ruined beyond repair. Sir Kay said, "Where's the sword that Lancy was using?" Ray asked. Although the sword itself wasn't ruined, it's practically just a basic tier weapon right now. For some reason, the magical properties of the beast crystal inside were gone. Gary and Ray, you get to pick first. Ray went over and looked at the pieces of equipment, until finally deciding on the shoulder guard piece. There was nothing else there that really interested him, and he thought the others would fare better with the rest. Sir Kay had already paid for his own items to be repaired, so his gauntlets and chest piece were back in top shape. Originally, Ray wanted a better sword, but Gary had already picked the dual blades, and they came as a pair. The dual blades taken by Gary were a dark purple in color. They were quite thin and had a creuse going upward to them both. Monk decided to take a chest piece and some boots. Light armor to protect himself and keep him nimble on his feet. For some reason, Kyle was drawn to the chain weight for some reason, even though he had never used a weapon like it before. In his head, he could picture himself using it quite well. I suggest you get your armor dyed. The tournament is coming, and it's a chance for you to show off your powers. You want to stand out, right? If you no longer wish to be a knight when you are done studying, then the tournament will be a good opportunity for you to get scouted from by the noble families and act as their guards. Sir Kay explained. Because of the beast crystal armor coming from all sorts of different beasts, there were a lot of times when their equipment would mismatch. A lot of knights and armies chose to dye their equipment to represent their colors. Some students just did it as a fashion statement. Although Ray didn't care as much, he did like the color red. So, taking Sir Kay's advice, he decided he would get his equipment dyed as well. Their hunting session had been canceled for a week due to the incident that happened last time. A lot of people asked what had happened to Lancey, but no one really had a concrete answer. There was a rumor going around that he died bravely in a mission. Of course, only Ray and the others knew the truth of the whole matter. Sir Kay was right. It seemed like no one knew of the faction called Pure Blood. It was also hard for the group to go around asking about it, afraid that they might ruffle the wrong feathers and bring attention to themselves. In the evening, Ray would travel to the foothills with Noir. When he put her back into the system, the flames seemed to stop affecting her. She healed just as quickly as his body, which was a relief. His first non-human companion who was loyal to him. Without the help of her and Gary at that time, Ray would have died. He knew from this incident he needed to get stronger, so he didn't have to rely on the help of others. The easiest way to do that right now was to gather more crystals. The problem with the upcoming tournament was that Ray wasn't allowed to use his abilities. The second he did, the Academy would know of his hidden powers. If he wanted to win this tournament RO, get a high position, he would have to do it using his pure strength. All of these reasons led him to sneak out and hunt. When hunting around the foothills, Ray came across an area where there were ice golems. This was a gold mine for him, as ice golem were weak to fire. They also carried an elemental attribute, ice. After defeating 7 of them, Ray managed to absorb 6+ points on his ice attribute and gathered 3 crystals via the system and 4 by carving them out of the golems. Ray would come back and return to the foothills, often to look for new beasts. He found that a lot of beasts in the area carried the ice attribute. It was important for him to find a new type of beast, as the system would stop giving him crystals after defeating the same beast all over again. On top of this, every day, Ray would train with the old man and hone his hand-to-hand combat skills. He would train with the Black Sash Knights to work on footwork and sword skills, then hunt in the evening to gather crystals and improve his body and elemental powers. After hunting every day for the last 3 weeks, Ray had become stronger. Stats: Race, Dragon Knight. Mana Pool, 10. Fire Element 16. Ice Element 12. Basic Tier Points 100. Intermediate Tier Points 43. Skills: 3/1000. Dragon Eyes, Mana Drain, Mana Eater. Pet, Noir. Race, Horned Wold. Less than 100 basic tier points. Less than 58 intermediate tier points. He also currently held 10 intermediate beast crystal items. None of these was of use to him, as they were weapons or items that he wouldn't need nor use. He kept them for now, in the case that he would find an advanced tier crystal in the future and needed money to craft it into an item. However, he wasn't the only one who had gotten stronger during this time. For the last 3 weeks, the team had defeated a lot of intermediate creatures and had gathered stronger equipment. Ian had better axes, Martha had better bow and arrows, Monk with his daggers, and so on. It was going to be a tough competition. There was even a third-year student that Ray needed to worry about, like Harry and Jasmine.it, was ashamed that Ray still hadn't figured out the condition to unlock more skills. There were some useful ones that he would like to use, but there was no time left. Finally, Ray woke up at 6 a.m. that morning. Instead of putting on the standard uniform like every other day, today was different. Usually, when inside the academy, students were only allowed to wear the school uniform with training equipment. The weapons dedicated for training were mostly made out of wood. This way, they wouldn't seriously injure themselves when sparring. The only time they were allowed to use their beast gear was on missions and when hunting. Ray had successfully dyed all his current equipment in red with black outline. His fanged boar chest piece, his newly acquired shoulder guard, and his boots, which were only standard equipment and were nothing special. As for his gauntlets, they were already red, so there was no need to dye them. Today, everyone taking part in the tournament was to wear the best gear they owned. A part of it would allow one to use their real weapons. The tournament was taking place at the sports arena in the city. It was around a 20-minute walk from the academy. Although the city was filled with mostly knights, it didn't stop everyone from participating in regular activities. The city had an arena where they would often host sporting events or team games. This was where all the students were to gather today. Looking around, in the dorms, Ray could see everyone seemed to be nervous, to the point that some helped each other put on their gear and equipment for their hand were shaking too much. But for Ray, it didn't really matter as much. While the rest were still struggling to get ready, Ray decided to leave the room and get a head start on everyone. He didn't get to see the city as much before because of his jam-packed schedule, so he wanted to take this chance. While walking through the city, he noticed the atmosphere was different than usual. The whole city felt alive and less tense. Usually, the knights were always serious and on guard, but today, it felt more like a festival. Another big difference was the people inside the city. Avrian was filled with mostly just knights with a few merchants here and there. Today, there were people from all different cities who came to visit. Once a year, Avrian would open its gates to surrounding cities for the tournament. A lot of nobles would look for talented knights to recruit to their own army or even use as a guard. Now, everyone at Avrian wanted to become a knight and fight in the front lines against the Shadow Plague. But due to the high prestige that Avrian Academy had, a lot of people sent their sons and daughters to train here. Finally, after a good walk and touring the place, Ray reached the arena. Outside was jam-packed with people waiting and full of energy to enter. The starting event wouldn't even start till 9, so it was impressive to already see this many people waiting outside. Luckily, there was a separate entrance for the participants. Outside the participants-only entrance, a lot of parents had come to visit their children and wish them good luck before letting them head back inside. As Ray walked past the crowd waiting to get inside, he could hear the remarks they made about him. They really allowed a redhead to enter the competition? Even his gear is red. Does he want to curse the whole city? I hear the academy has allowed other redheads to enter the competition as well. Oh, how Avrian Academy has fallen. Perhaps I should have sent my son to another academy this year. The comments used to bother Ray a bit when he was younger, but now, he was used to it. It has been a while since he had gotten this type of treatment. Ever since his match with Sebastian, Ray never heard a single word of disdain from the other students. Well, at least not in front of him. He continued to go inside and followed the signs to the waiting area for the contestants. The signs led him to an underground stairway, eventually to a huge set of double doors. When Ray entered, his eyes met with a huge hall. The hall was as big as the dining hall at Avrian Academy. The only difference was there were no chairs and tables. The hall was currently half filled with contestants. In total, there would be around 350 contestants competing in this tournament. Some contestants were practicing inside the hall or checking their equipment. Others had formed groups and were chatting casually. It was a mix of second and third year students, and the difference in equipment was dramatic. It was obvious that the third years had an advantage in this tournament. Every year so far, a third-year student had come out as a winner. It was an expected result. In truth, the tournament was a way to show the second-year students that they had a long way to go to keep them from getting lazy. His roommates still hadn't arrived, and even though Ray spotted Harry and Jasmine around, he didn't bother to go over and say hi. He wouldn't exactly say they were friends. Instead, he decided to go to an empty space in the room and practice meditating. After an hour passed, the room was beginning to fill up. The double doors opened and recognizable faces walked through. There, Ray's there. Kyle pointed. The entire group came over to where Ray was, giving him company, and started to talk about the upcoming tournament. How did you get space like this all to yourself? Kyle asked. Even though the room was full, for some reason, the space Ray had gone to when he first arrived never became filled with people. People avoided him like a plague. I think people are just avoiding me. Ray replied, You're like a human repellent. We should start taking you with us to restaurants. Everyone ignored Kyle's remark, and it suddenly got quiet. Martha broke the silence by saying, I heard the first round is going to be a battle royale style. Yes, usually they split the rounds into 2 groups. Slivia said, nodding her head in agreement. Second-year students go first, and then the third-year students. The last 10 students go through to the knockout stages, which are one-on-one. There are 10 spots. That's great. We can all go through together. Monk smiled in enthusiasm. Hearing this, for some reason a slight frown had appeared on Martha's face. But that means we might end up going against each other after that. We can deal with that when the time comes. Dan replied, We want to prove ourselves, right? Then it's something we have to do. No personal feelings involved. They couldn't argue with that. All they needed to worry about was doing their best. Suddenly, Slivia placed her hand in the middle of everyone. They all looked at it strangely, wondering what she was trying to do. Then, let's promise to get the top 10 spots together. Slivia said. One by one, they started to put their hands on top of each other, all apart from Ray, who felt this was a little childish. Come on, Ray, Kyle said. Stop being a sour grape. Reluctantly, Ray placed his hand on top with everyone else as well. Together, 1, 2, 3, hurrah! They all shouted, while Ray and the others waited in the hall for further instructions. A group of adult knights entered the room. Each of them held a fairly large sack that was filled with something unknown. They then began going around the room, handing out bracelets from the sacks to each and every one of the contestants. Not much was said about the bracelets. They were just told that they needed to wear them if they wanted to participate. The bracelet was clear like glass and slightly larger than an adult's fist. Similar to Ray's gauntlets, when they put them around their wrists, it shrunk down to a perfect fit. After waiting for a little while longer, a Knight Master entered through the door. It was the female Knight Master, Rose. Rose was the leader of the Green Sash Knights, and she bore a special sash around her proudly as she walked through the crowd of people to the other end of the hall. When she looked like she was ready to speak, the whole room went silent. Good morning, everyone. I'm here to tell you all about the rules of this tournament. The first order of business. Will ranks 1 to 5 of the third-year students please come forward? 5 students whom Ray had never seen before went over to where Rose was standing. Looking at the third-year students reminded him of Harry. When the 2 of them had fought, he showed the number on his communicator, and it was only at rank 50. These students standing next to Rose were above even him and considered the strongest at the academy. Next, will the ranks 1 to 5 of the second-year students please come forward? Gary, Sylvia, Ian, Monk, and Dan all went forward to line up. There wasn't much change in the ranking system from the first year to the second years. Dan and Monk had always been slowly creeping their way up the ladder of the ranks, and they had finally achieved top spots. When their room eventually held the top 5 spots, they agreed to not fight each other. After all, they were a team. Everyone had become good friends and thought there was no point to switch places between ranks. Right now, it was different, though. Everyone wanted to show the audience outside what skills they had learned. The 10 students standing here will be seated. They will not participate in the first round and will go straight through to the knockout stages. The students began to get rowdy. What the hell? Kyle protested. Didn't we just make a pact? They already made it through. Rose decided to ignore the complaining students and continued talking. You might be wondering what the devices on your wrist are for. In a moment, you should all see a number display on them. As Ray looked towards his wrist, a green figure could be seen 100 HP written across the bracelet. The first round of the competition will be a battle royale. The second-year students will participate first. The last 5 students remaining will go on ahead to the knockout stages. She then lifted one of the bracelets in the air. This is your winning ticket. In the Battle Royale, you will only be permitted to use the regular wooden training equipment. For each hit you take, this number will go down. When the number reaches 0, you will be eliminated from the tournament. Rose looked at the students before pointing towards Martha. Martha, will you please join me? She said. Martha quickly ran over to Rose's position. She then handed Martha a wooden bow with a blunt wooden arrow. Rose then started to look at the second-year students that were lined up and pointed at Ian. Big guy, you look like you could take a little pain. I want you to stand in front of Martha and let her shoot you. Doing as asked, she readied her bow and chose to aim the arrow towards Ian's abs. As the arrow left the bow, it hit and bounced right off Ian's body. As you can see, the student has taken no damage, but if we look at his bracelet, it now says 90 HP. We want the students to show their skill in the first round, not their wealth or luck. This will put you all on an even playing field. The first round is all about skill. Now, Martha, would you please take a shot using ki? Martha again took a shot at Ian, this time infusing ki into her bow, an arrow. Now his bracelet is displaying the number 70. The stronger the attack, the more HP is taken. If Ian had blocked using ki, it would counteract that and just do the normal 10 points of damage. That is all you need to know for the first round. The students were then asked to put their equipment in a storage room and then meet back in the hall. This included Ray, who was asked to remove his gauntlets. Due to the sharp fingertips, Ray was only allowed to take in the armor he was wearing. Looking around inside the storage room, he could see a wall lined with wooden equipment and all types of weapons. Axes, maces, bows, everything. Ray went over and just decided to pick up a regular short sword. It was the weapon he was most familiar with, as it was the same size as the one his father had given him. The 10 seated students were then taken somewhere else, since there was no need for them to be there. From the hallway, they were further escorted down a huge tunnel. The tunnel went on for about 5 minutes, and at the end of it, they could see a bright light. As soon as they went into the bright light, they were welcomed with roaring cheers. It felt like the whole ground was shaking. The whole arena was completely packed with people, and not a single seat was left empty. The arena also had a special seating area where the 6 elders sat and the knight masters as well. Just underneath them were 2 squire masters holding a crystal microphone. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We will now begin the opening round of the Avrian Academy tournament. As the man spoke into the crystal, it was magnified so the whole audience could hear him. The students were asked to spread out all over the arena. There were around 150 contestants in total on the ground floor. As Ray went into his open space, he couldn't help but shake the feeling that the other players were looking at him. He could feel their eyes piercing into his skull. What are they up to? The first round will be a battle royal style tournament. The last 5 students remaining will go through to the next round. A hologram screen suddenly appeared above the fighting arena. As you can see here, the audiences are able to see the HP of every single contestant. Once the HP counter of a contestant reaches 0, they will be eliminated. Now let's get ready to start in. The whole audience started to count down together. 3, 2, 1. As soon as the fight had started, the 10 people closest to Ray dashed towards him. Ray had a feeling that the other participants were watching him, and he was right. They had planned to attack him together from the very beginning, knowing Ray was too strong to defeat on their own. As the first man swung at Ray with a sword, Ray instinctively put his arm up to block the strike. But as soon as the sword touched Ray's arm, his bracelet's number display changed. -10 HP. Although the strike didn't hurt Ray at all, the system had counted the strike as a clean hit since the wooden sword made direct contact with his skin. Ray was currently using ki to reinforce the strength of his skin, but the first round was about skill, not strength. Ray finally understood the words of Rose and thought that this would be difficult. It wouldn't be hard for Ray if he only needed to beat all the contestants, but to do so without getting hit would be troublesome. The man who attacked Ray was speechless. When his sword touched Ray's skin, it felt like he was hitting against a solid bar of steel. Ray quickly grabbed the man's wrist and twisted it, causing him to drop his sword. The other men all rushed and ready to strike Ray, at once hoping to get rid of him quickly. Ray saw this and grabbed the other man's wrist. The man tried to struggle away, but Ray's strength was too monstrous. As the others came closer to attack, he lifted the man's body, using him as a human shield. Each strike hit the man all over. His bracelet pinged constantly and started to display numerous notifications. -10 HP. -10 HP. Until the number had eventually reached 0. The men stopped attacking, so Ray threw his meat shield to one side. And we have the first contestant to be eliminated. The announcer shouted. The crowd started to boo. They thought Ray's tactic of using another person as a human shield was dirty. As the score on the man's bracelet reached 0, a bright white light started to shine around his whole body and teleported him away. The bracelet was engraved with teleportation magic. It was set to teleport the students to a medical site near the arena once their points reached 0. Ray was trying to figure out why these men had grouped up and aimed for him. Were they from pure blood? Or did they agree beforehand to group up together? Ray then took a closer look at the men that were facing him. He recognized their faces well. It had been a while, but he had promised himself that he would never forget their faces. One of the men who stood at the center and in front of the rest was one of the first ones to throw an object at Ray. The men currently attacking Ray were one of the groups that had put a lot of money on the fight between Gary and Monk. When Ray had stopped the fight, the group had promised they would get their revenge one day, but after seeing the fight between Ray and Sebastian, they knew they were not strong enough on their own. They had been waiting for this opportunity to strike Ray together. They couldn't do this in the academy as they only allowed one-on-one battles, so this was their chance. What they didn't count on was how much stronger Ray had gotten in that time. Ray had been planning to hold back in the tournament, not wanting to draw any attention to himself, but their actions had brought back painful memories. After the attack by pure blood, Ray wasn't going to let anyone off easy. Another man charged forward. Ray struck at his legs before he could even attack. The man stood still for a while and then completely collapsed, screaming in pain. His legs had been broken so badly that the bone was sticking out. Ray charged at the other 8 men, taking them down in one blow. It was so fast they didn't even have time to strike back. Ray made sure to strike them with just enough strength to do damage, but not to kill them. A few broken bones the Academy would be able to heal, but a death they wouldn't easily forgive. 9 men currently laid on the floor, rolling around, screaming pain. The audience was greatly confused. Why hadn't they been teleported away like the man earlier? As they looked on the display, they could see why. The men currently on the floor only had -20 HP taken away from them. The battle system counted each strike as a key strike from Ray, causing only 20 points of damage. What the Academy didn't expect was someone who was able to completely overpower the other students to the point where they could defeat them with one blow. The crowd started to become rowdy. That child is a devil. How could he hurt people like that? He should have never been allowed in the competition in the first place. He's fighting dirty. What kind of parents raised him? As the man in the crowd said these words, Ray turned around and stared directly at him. His eyes were fierce. The man started to sweat. Fear started to grow in his heart. There was a good distance of around 100 meters between Ray and him. How could Ray have possibly heard him and knew exactly where he was, the man thought? Although it seemed impossible, there was no doubt in the man's mind that Ray was staring directly at him. He's a monster. The man stood up and pointed. The 6 elders were currently sitting up in a separate seating compartment to the rest of the audience, discussing the events that were happening. Should we do something about the boy? One of the elders proposed. The people call him dirty, yet they see nothing wrong with 10 people ganging up on one. The old man countered. What if he is to kill a student? An elder asked. You have my word that my student will not go that far. The old man promised. The old man had felt close to Ray. So much so that he treated Ray like his own son. He thought he knew Ray well, and even though he said those words, he didn't believe in them himself. The anger he was currently sensing from Ray frightened him. Author note: as you can tell, this chapter was written in the third person rather than the first person. In the tournament, there are a lot of viewpoints and rules that need to be explained, which would be extremely difficult in the first person. In the past, I have switched between first and third person, but this tournament arc is simply too long. I want to get audience feedback. If you don't mind the third person writing, I can stick with this for now and revert back a later time. Or stick to the third person for the rest of the novel. Please let me know what you think. Gary, Slivia, Monk, Ian, and Dan were currently standing together on the top level of the arena. It was the highest viewing point, but there were no seats, and only contestants were allowed to be there. Their group and many other third-year students were currently watching the match below. The group had just witnessed Ray's brutal beating of the 10 students. Slivia could see the anger in Ray's eyes and was starting to get worried. I don't understand. Could none of those students use key? Dan asked. They were using key, Slivia replied. It's just that Ray's key was simply far too overpowering that they weren't able to do anything. Slivia was currently using key to activate the cells in her eyes. This gave her a second type of vision where she could see the key flow of other students. It was similar to Ray's dragon eyes, but a much weaker version of it. All she could tell was Ray's key was incredibly strong and currently running wild. He must have been hiding his strength from us. I hope the students aren't too badly hurt, Ian said. They deserve it, every single one of them, Gary replied. Everyone was surprised to see Gary say something. He hadn't spoken to them, or anyone much since the death of his sister. Did they really think they could do something against him just because it was 10 against 1? Gary laughed. You guys might not remember, but I remember that big nose well. They were the ones who started the riot when Monk and I fought, and it looks like Ray remembers them well. I just hope he doesn't go too far, Monk said, remembering what happened to Sebastian. Gary didn't say much more, but in truth, he didn't care if all of them died. It was probably people like this that went up against his sister. They tried to use the school's rules as a way to justify their actions. A group of third years standing by the edge were also watching the arena. Is that the guy you were talking about, Harry? Jack asked. Yes. When he was only a third-year student and he had no idea of ki, his strike almost hit me. I knew he would grow into a monster, but I didn't expect this. Jack started to smile. His heartbeat started to pound harder and faster. Jack wanted to jump over the railings and fight Ray now, but he knew the time for the two of them to meet would come. Jack was currently ranked the #1 student in the whole of Avrian Academy. He had an athletic body chiseled, as if he was the son of the god of war, and the looks to go with it. His short black hair complemented his masculine eyebrows and square jawline. People would think the divine being had given him the blessings of beauty, but the ones that knew Jack well knew it was more like a blessing of a warrior. Jack only cared for one thing: fighting. He loved to fight and wanted to just fight strong opponents. He knew the line of good and bad, though. This was drilled into him by his parents. To satisfy his hunger for fighting, he decided to join Avrian on the front line against the Shadow Plague, the strongest foe known to man. Cherry, is there anyone that interests you? Harry asked. Cherry was standing right by Jack. She was a muscular girl who looked like she had been raised by wild animals. She had purple wavy hair and the body of an Amazon warrior. Why ask if you already know the answer? Harry just smiled back at Cherry. The 5 people passing this exam have already been decided. Harry and the others already knew what Cherry was talking about. Watching the fight, it was easy to see that there were currently 5 students who were outperforming the rest in the arena. The first one was Ray. Many students were now staying clear of him after his performance. The next 2 were Sloth and Badger. They were using a pair of weapons called the Catter. They were similar to daggers, only there were no hilts. You held a long bar that then extended into a triangle blade. The 2 twins were quick with their hands and worked well together. They would often use a display or acrobats to avoid oncoming opponents and attack others. The next one that had caught the third-year student's eyes was Kyle. Kyle was currently using a variation of the chain and weight as his weapon. He was skillfully using it to keep a good distance away from his opponents. The long range of the weapon made it difficult for anyone to get close. Lastly was Martha. She had the great sense of timing of when to strike and when to not, using the bodies of others to avoid getting hit. Every time she would take a shot at someone, she would move so others didn't know of her position. As long as these 5 didn't decide to go against each other, everyone was sure that they would go through to the next round. While Gary was busy looking at the fight from above, he heard a female voice call out his name. Gary, over here. Jasmine waved. Then she signaled for Gary to come over and join her. "Who's the pretty girl?" Dan asked. "I've never seen her before." Slivia replied. "Monk, what about you?" "Who, me?" "No, never. I don't even know who you're talking about." Monk was terrible at keeping secrets, and judging by his reactions, everyone knew Monk was hiding something. As Gary came over, Jasmine and he moved to a quiet place where no one was around. She then whispered in his ear, "Do you remember that underground cave we went to behind the red door?" Gary was suddenly interested in what she had to say. "Well, I started having dreams about it. I was getting obsessed then. I found out something. I found another way in. Another entrance apart from the red door." Ray currently stood in the center of the arena looking at the 9 men on the floor rolling about. For some reason, even though they were suffering, Ray's anger wasn't settling down. It was as if another part of his body had taken over. Every time he would hit one of them, images of Amy, images of Gary being hurt by pure blood, and images of Monk when he was hurt by Sebastian would flash through his head. These types of people didn't deserve to live. Ray started walking over to the person closest to him. Everyone was watching in anticipation, wondering what he was going to do. "The boy's going to kill them. I'm telling you, we need to get him out of there," one of the elders demanded. The old man remained silent and decided to just watch intently. Slivia and the rest were also holding their breath, wondering what Ray would do next. Ray bent down to the person closest to him and said, "You will never be able to use ki ever again." Ray then placed his hand on top of the man's chest. Activating skill mana drain. Mana pool +1. Mana pool +1. Mana has successfully been completely drained. "Only 2, Ray said. Slivia and the old man couldn't believe their eyes. The two of them were truly worried about what Ray would do. They activated the key in their eyes, and what they saw blew their mind. It looked like the key was escaping from one body and going into Ray's. Once Ray had completely absorbed the man's key, he gently hit the contestant until his bracelet displayed the number 0. The white light surrounded the man and teleported him away. The elders and the whole crowd watching were relieved. They were holding the breath in till the very last moment. "Looks like you were right about the boy. He isn't harming the students any further," an elder said. The old man laughed nervously. The other elders weren't fighters like the old man, so they had no clue what just happened, but the old man was afraid that others might have seen the same thing he did, especially members of pure blood. Ray continued, going to each contestant that was lying on the floor and performed the skill mana drain on them. Mana pool +1. Mana pool +1. After absorbing 8 contestants, Ray had currently gained an additional 11 mana points, bringing his total mana pool to 21. Ray started walking over to the last person on the floor. Most of the contestants had been eliminated at this point. Only a few had seen what Ray had done and decided to not go against him. A girl named Sarah spotted Ray in the middle of the arena draining the last man on the floor. Seeing Ray kneeling next to the man, she thought that Ray was an easy target. She readied her bow and aimed directly at Ray's back. The arrow flew through the air and bounced of Ray, as if it was hitting a solid wall. 80 HP, Ray's bracelet now displayed. Ray ignored the shot and continued to absorb the last contestant's key. Then, when it finally finished, his points were now at 22. Ray quickly tapped the man with key 4 times, sending him off to teleport away. Ray stood up and turned around. He could see Sarah standing there with her bow. For some reason, when looking into Ray's eyes, Sarah could feel a shiver run down her spine. She rapidly shot more arrows in Ray's direction. Ray slowly walked towards her, avoiding each arrow strike by a narrow margin until he finally, just a few feet away. Sarah was shaking. She went to her quiver to get another arrow. When she looked down, she realized her quiver was empty. She no longer had any arrows. When she looked up to look at Ray again, he was already directly in front of her. Ray grabbed Sarah by the head and started the mana drain process. No one knew what Ray was doing, but Sarah could feel her energy seeping away from her. She was too frightened to move in case Ray would do something even worse. An audience member stood up from the crowd and shouted, "Get your hands off my daughter, you monster!" Ray looked over in the direction the voice was coming from. It was the same man who had said, "What kind of parents raised him?" Images of Ray's father popped up in his head. How the kingdom had abandoned him when he had fought on the front lines for all those years. How, when he was infected by the shadow, plagued the kingdom, didn't send anyone to help his poor mother. Ray pulled his fist back, ready to punch Sarah in the stomach. Sarah closed her eyes as she waited for the outcome she couldn't avoid. Suddenly, before Ray could move his fist forward, a chain wrapped around his fist and started to pull back against it. As he looked back, he saw Kyle holding on to the chain. Then the two twins, Badger and Sloth, came and pulled Sarah back away from Ray. Lastly, Martha was there, pointing her arrow towards Ray. "What is this about?" Ray shouted. "Ray, just leave it," Kyle responded. "Look, I understand the people before deserved it, but she has done nothing wrong. She is just a contestant." "Ray, please, this isn't like you," Martha cried. The four of them had been watching Ray's actions for a while now. In the middle of the match, they had made a pact with the twins, agreeing that the five of them would go on to the next round. The twins liked Ray and looked up to him. Whenever the Dragon Knight training would happen, Ray would often encourage them when they were feeling down or couldn't succeed at something. When all the contestants were eventually defeated, they turned around to see Ray holding Sarah. They knew something was wrong with him. The pressure coming from Ray was frightening and sickly. They all acted without even needing to speak to each other. Slivia couldn't help herself as she watched Ray. Tears started to roll down her cheek. "What's wrong?" Monk asked. "Can't you see?" "Ray's not angry, he's sad." Ray had a feeling in his chest that wouldn't disappear. No matter what he did, the feeling seemed to stay there. He originally thought he wanted revenge. That's what he was doing now, but why wasn't the feeling going away? Then Ray realized something. Every time he would start to trust or care for people, the world would torture him in some way. The world had given him a second chance, and through that second chance, he saw how cruel humans truly were. Not just to beasts or dragons, but to themselves. He wanted to trust humans. He wanted to find a place he could call home. If he had been given the chance to just live a peaceful life, then everything might have turned out fine. But the world didn't want him to. The world showed him what humans were like. It gave him red hair, and he saw the discrimination people gave. Then it tested him again. When he chose to save 2 lives, he nearly lost his own. When his father had been infected, no one came to help. Now it seemed like everyone was out to kill him, and anyone who got close to him, even Amy, who he had only met briefly. As Ray stood in the arena in silence, the group thought they had been successful in getting through to Ray. Suddenly, Ray pulled on the chain that was wrapped around on his right hand. Kyle tried to resist, but ended up being dragged through the air. As Kyle flew close to him, Ray jumped up and slammed him on the floor with his 2 fists. Kyle lay motionless at Ray's feet. Ray slowly bent down and whispered in Kyle's ear, "You need to take your training more seriously. Focus your ki." Martha reacted to the sudden turn of events by firing off 3 arrows in the air. Ray not only dodged them, but grabbed 2 of the arrows and threw them towards either side of Martha. If Martha moved, she would be hit by her own arrows. Ray dashed forward and punched Martha in the stomach. As her body slowly slumped to the ground, Ray whispered, "Don't hesitate. Predict where I will go, not where I am." The 2 twins came charging in at Ray together. Ray imbued his left foot with ki and smashed the ground, causing pieces of the arena to fly through the air. He punched 2 of the bigger pieces, launching them forward, and they crashed into the twins. As the twins laid there on the floor, Ray casually walked up to them. "It's good to be brave, but without a plan, you're just throwing your lives away." The crowd had never seen a student display such dominance in the arena before. They had just seen Ray take out 4 of the best students Avrian Academy had. How is this guy not in the top 5 rankings? The other students must be crazy strong, one of the third-year students said. Nearly all of the third-year students were staring at Slivia and her group. If Ray wasn't qualified to be in the top 5, then these 5 here must truly be monsters. The whole group wanted to dig a hole to hide themselves in. They knew what everyone was thinking, but it simply wasn't true. Every single one of them knew Ray was the strongest out of the second years. If it wasn't for the fact that they wanted to see the outcome of the match, they would have already disappeared. Sarah was the last one currently standing in the arena. The other 4 students were too hurt to move. Ray had only hit each of them once, causing 20 points of damage, which wasn't enough to send them away. Ray slowly walked over to Sarah. He focused the key to his fingertips and tapped her on the head 4 times. As the bracelet started to glow, a white light surrounded her. "I'm sorry," Ray consoled. The announcers were so shocked by the whole event that they hadn't been commentating on anything for the last 15 minutes of the fight. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have our 5 contenders going into the next round." A massive roar started to build up. The whole arena started to shake once more. The crowd couldn't help but cheer and shout praises. Even if they didn't agree with his early methods, they couldn't help but praise his fighting skills. The next round will start in an hour. While we take our time to repair the stadium, please use this time to buy snacks and go to the toilet. You don't want to miss anything. For the next round, we have the 3rd-year students. The bracelets started to glow around the 5 that were still in the arena. After the white light surrounded them, they were all transported to another large hall. Ray and the others found themselves surrounded by the participants. Many of them were lying down on the floor with a bed and a medical personnel next to them. The academy was currently healing the contenders. Even though Ray was practically undamaged from the fight, the medical personnel still wanted to take a look at him. Currently, in the elders' seating area, they were talking about Ray. "It looks like he might be the boy in the prophecy after all." "Yes, and did you see his angry outburst? He will bring doom to us all. With the right guidance, he will save us. Do you want to kick the boy out? That is perhaps the very reason he will try to take us all out in the first place." The elders carried on to quibble and argue with each other. Then Wilfred had appeared and walked over to the old man. He whispered to the old man, "I did as you asked and had a look at the students. It seems you were right. They can no longer gather their key. The doctors say it might be temporary, but I fear for the worst." The old man and Wilfred were worried. They needed to do everything in power. After watching Ray fight, Gary felt tense all over his body. He was itching to get out and move. All he wanted to do right now was swing his sword at something. He was kind of jealous that the other participants got a fight while he had to stay up here and watch. Gary knew more than anyone how strong Ray truly was, but seeing it now in front of him, Gary felt like he was just falling further and further behind. But what scared Gary more than anything was there were even stronger people and beasts than him out there. If he wanted to punish the people who had killed his sister, then he needed to become strong enough to take on anyone that got in his way. Nobles hired many talented knights as guards, and some even had their own army. Gary wasn't just planning on taking out the person who killed his sister, but every single one related to them as well. He wanted them to feel the same pain as he did. As the match finished, Gary started to walk off away from the group. He needed to get some swings in to calm himself down. He walked off without saying a word. Slivia tried to go after him, but Martha grabbed her by the arm to stop her. "It's best if we just let him deal with it himself. Gary's strong. Remember last time he eventually got out of that, right? When he truly needs our help, that's when we'll come to get him." Slivia understood Martha's words, but she couldn't help but get the feeling that this small little family she had built was starting to fall apart. And, as she was the leader, she was the one who needed to fix it. Gary arrived at the training hall. It was a place for participants to practice before their upcoming fight. All of the 2nd-year students had just finished fighting, so currently only the 3rd-year students were inside waiting to be called for the next event. Gary wanted to blow off some steam, and the training dolls in the training room were perfect for that exact thing. Gary activated one of the training dolls at the highest levels and started hacking away at it. The onlookers were impressed. Gary managed to avoid every strike while dealing a strike back in a fatal position. Gary was unaware, but currently, many of the 3rd-year students were watching him practice. He's the number 1 ranked student out of the 2nd years. "What do you think of him, Harry?" a 3rd-year student asked. "The other one is more my type," Harry replied. "The boy looks good. His style reminds me of yours. He might actually be even better," Cherry said with a slight smile. Harry knew that Cherry was trying to rile him up, but it still worked. Harry slowly started to walk closer to where Gary was training with the doll. After 5 minutes of impressive sword work and pinpoint accuracy, Gary decided to take a break. As soon as he did, Harry walked over to the same training doll. He drew his sword and activated the training doll to the same level as Gary. The doll started, and so did Harry. Harry started slashing and avoiding the doll's strike continually. After a while, people realized what Harry was doing. He was currently displaying the exact same moves that Gary had performed. Every single dodge and strike back were exactly the same. On the last strike, Harry infused a sword key and whacked the doll's head towards Gary. The doll's head went flying through the air, and Gary moved his head at the last second. "It was easier than I thought," Harry said, looking towards Gary. The third-year students didn't know what to say. They had known Harry for the longest time, and he was only ranked 50 in the student rankings. He was a good fighter, but not at the level where he could do something like that. The others started to wonder if Harry had been hiding his strength this whole time. "If you want to fight, you just have to ask." Gary then pulled out his sword and started walking over to Harry. The third-year students were getting excited. They couldn't wait to see a battle between two skilled swordsmen. The two were only a short distance away from each other, and it looked like at any second they would clash heads. Just then, a female's voice could be heard. "There you are," Slivia shouted. Slivia came rushing over and grabbed Gary by the hand. "Come on, the third year's round is about to start. Let's get going," Slivia said as she dragged Gary out of the room. Slivia had been peeking through the door for a while now, thinking of what to say to Gary. Then she saw that Gary was currently going to get into a fight. If he did, then he would have been disqualified from the tournament. At the last second, she had no choice but to barge in and save him. While being dragged away by Slivia, Gary realized the grave mistake he could have just committed. If he couldn't compete in the tournament, it meant he wouldn't be in the top 5. "Thank you," Gary said. "Hey, I'm the leader, right? It's my job to keep you guys all safe." Slivia and Gary had arrived at where the rest of the group currently were. They were standing on the balcony of the arena, getting ready for the next round to start at any moment. When Slivia looked at the group, she noticed that someone was missing. That was Ray. Ray should have long been released by the medical team by now, especially since he hadn't received any injuries. Slivia went running around everywhere looking for Ray. She checked every location she could think of. Finally, while running around the hallways, she spotted Ray talking to Wilfred just outside the Elder's temporary room. She quickly hid around the corridor corner, not wanting to interrupt their conversation. "What did you just say, Ray?" Wilfred shouted. Ray repeated himself once more. "I want to drop out of the tournament." Slivia could no longer hear the conversation between Ray and Wilfred. After that shocking reveal, it seemed like the two had quietened down to discuss something. After a back and forth between the two of them, they eventually parted ways, and Ray started to make his way back. As Ray turned the corner, he spotted Slivia there. "Did you hear the conversation between Wilfred and me?" Ray asked. "Only a little." "Well, don't worry about it," Ray said as he continued to walk off. "Wait," Slivia shouted. "I know you feel bad about what you did, but no one blames you. The others told me what you said to them. You were just trying to help them." Ray stayed silent for a little while before he decided to reply. "Do you know why I acted like that?" "I don't know why, but all I know is you looked sad." Ray then felt something in his chest again. He finally came to the realization he wasn't angry. He was sad. He didn't want to admit it to himself this whole time, but the death of Amy had affected him more than he thought. Gary's sister died. Now that I think about it, I don't know why I was so stubborn. Perhaps because she was a human, I didn't want to believe it, but she was my first friend. Slivia understood. She had heard the stories from the other red-haired children about how they grew up, how they were outcast and treated like children of Senator. From just these words, she could tell that Amy meant a lot to him. The one thing Slivia was stumped on was when Ray said, because she was a human, but Slivia simply thought Ray had misspoken. Slivia then held out her hand. "You're not alone, Ray." Ray thought about it for a while. Perhaps if he hadn't been so stubborn with himself and accepted the humans around him as friends, then maybe he could do something about it. In the past, he wasn't able to protect the people he cared about. But right now, there were people right next to him that he wanted to protect. Humans were cruel, but Ray found out not all of them were. Some deserved to be punished, and Ray would continue to do so. But there were also those that Ray now wanted to protect. Ray held Sylvia's hand and said, "Thank you." Slivia blushed a little before letting go, and the two of them carried on walking to meet up with the others. The two of them had finally arrived at the balcony with the others. "Slivia, your face is a little red. Did something happen between the two of you?" Martha asked jokingly. Slivia's head was now so hot it looked like steam was about to emit from it. No, I found him in the hall, and we just got here. Just then the announcers started to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for waiting. It is time for the next event to begin. It will now be starting in 3, 1, go. The match began, and everyone's eyes were now focused on down below. Hey, Gary, I don't see your girlfriend anywhere, Dan said. Gary was slightly confused by Dan's comment. He's talking about Jasmine, Monk replied. Just then everyone turned and smiled at Monk. Oh, so it looks like you do know something about her, Dan said. Gary started to look around the arena for Jasmine, but he too couldn't see her. Relax, she's just a third-year Black Sash Knight. She helped us out at training a few times, that's all, Gary said while he was still trying to find her. Martha pouted. So boring. You guys need to start thinking about romance once in a while instead of swords all the time. Ray started to focus and try to find Jasmine himself. It was hard for him to see, but eventually he found a space in the arena where it was slightly distorted. Jasmine had gotten better at using her black sash skills, but so did Ray. As the match continued, many contestants were quickly eliminated. Just like with the second years, there seemed to be a big difference in power between those in the top 10 compared to the rest of the academy. Is there anyone that catches your eye, Gary? Slivia asked, as she could see Gary was clearly focused on someone. The blonde boy at the back. Gary was currently focused on Harry. Surprisingly, Harry was currently the only student on the field who still had all of his HP. He hadn't been hit once. Even Jasmine, who had been hiding, had been hit by a stray arrow and lost some HP. Harry's style of fighting was beautiful. His swordsmanship was almost like a dance. He would be able to lead his opponents into the right place to attack, and once he had them where he wanted, he would make quick work of them hitting all the vital parts. Yes, he's very impressive. His style reminds me of yours a little bit, but different at the same time. While you attack more instinctively, it seems like his style, if more planned. Slivia replied. Gary didn't know about Harry, but he knew about himself. He couldn't quite explain it, but when he fought against people, sometimes these white lines would just show up telling him where to strike. The white lines occasionally appeared on a body or creature, and as long as he followed that path, he would do critical damage. It wouldn't happen all the time, but only in situations where he was desperate. The last time Gary experienced this was when he was fighting the Pure Blood member. Gary had been training every day since to try to get the same feeling to come again. He was hoping if he found a way to activate it at will, then he would be unstoppable. We have our 5 winners. Currently, standing in the ring were the 5 contestants that would go through to the elimination rounds. Harry had shown the most skill with his sword work. The next was a contender named Geo. He was a giant for his age, and his main weapon was a 2-handed axe. There were also 2 female warriors who worked together named Violet and Aqua. The 2 of them were sisters who used a metal fan to fight. Everyone in the arena was slightly confused. They could only see 4 in the ring: Harry, Geo, Violet, and Aqua, but then suddenly dark shadows started to form in the center of the arena. Once the shadows had disappeared, out came Jasmine. These were the 5 students going into the next round. The first round of the tournament had finished, and the third-year students were taken to the medical bay. Once everyone was healed up, they asked the 10 winning students from each year to meet back out on the arena. Currently standing in the arena form, the second-year students were Gary, Slivia, Dan, Martha, Monk, Kyle, Ian, Ray, Badger, and Sloth. They looked at each other and smiled. Each of them had managed to keep their promise with each other and made it through to the next round. Standing on the other side were the third-year students. Jack, Cherry, Harry, Jasmine were the ones that the others recognized. The others were Geo, Nay, Violet, and Aqua. The last person hadn't arrived on the field yet, but was the second-rank student named Killer. Wilfred was stood in the center with a holographic display behind him. Unfortunately, Killer can't make it due to personal matters, but we are here today to congratulate these 20 fine students, the best of the best at Avrian Academy. The crowd cheered even louder than they had done before. Each and every one of the students had displayed an amazing level of skill. The audience thought that these were the best and strongest students they had seen at Avrian before, and they hadn't even witnessed the top 5 of each year fight yet. Many of the people in the audience were nobles, and they were sure to send their sons and daughters to Avrian Academy as soon as they could. Wilfred cleared his throat before he continued speaking. For the next round, we have a surprise for you all. The second-year students have exceeded our expectations and have been the best we have seen since the start of Avrian Academy. We have decided to change things from the usual routine of past tournaments. Behold, Wilfred pointed to a large holographic display behind him. Then a bracket sheet had appeared with each and every one of the students' names and who their opponent was that they were facing. The holographic screen displayed this: Martha versus Cherry, Gary versus Harry, Monk versus Jasmine, Ian versus Geo, Kyle vs. Nay, Dan versus Arthur, Ray versus Killer, Badger versus Violet, Sloth versus Aqua, Slivia versus Jack. The second-year students' eyes looked like they were about to pop out of their skull. We have decided to have the second-year students face off against the third-year students. The winners of each fight will earn a place in the Avrian Academy team to the All-Kingdom Tournament. Ray had known about this beforehand. While Wilfred and Ray were talking, Wilfred had informed of his plans to Ray. Wilfred managed to convince Ray to stay in the tournament. Wilfred couldn't explain why, but simply said it had something to do with pure blood. This got Ray interested, and, in the end, he decided to take part. Gary was pleased he would get the chance to face Harry. Ever since their encounter in the training room, Gary wanted to fight Harry more than anyone else. And as if someone could hear his wishes, he was granted this fight. If he had known that Harry had once beaten Ray, Gary would have been even more excited. Slivia, on the other hand, was the most concerned. She currently had to face the strongest person at the academy, Jack. Slivia had never been confident in her one-on-one skills. She knew she had a tough battle ahead of her. Slivia felt like she currently had the whole world on her shoulders. She looked into the crowd, and she could see her 5 older siblings looking at her back. She needed to prove to her family that she wasn't worthless just because she didn't have magic. Monk was going up against Jasmine. Monk knew Jasmine's skills, while she was exceptionally good at using the Black Sash skills. Before he knew about Jasmine, Monk took pride in being the best at learning the Black Sash skills. If Monk wanted to get better, he knew he needed to beat her. Ray wasn't too concerned. He knew whoever he would be facing, he would most likely defeat with ease. He had more ki than ever now. After absorbing the 10 students, he had an additional 21 mana points in his mana pool. When he had 10, he was able to defeat an intermediate beast in one shot. The first match will begin tomorrow at midday. Please enjoy your time in the city, and everyone get a good rest. The joyous mood between Ray's group was quickly replaced with seriousness. Everyone had their opponent on their mind. The walk back to the dorm was near enough silent. When the group eventually reached the academy, everyone started to split off in separate directions, saying they needed to train. In the end, Ray was the only one left in the room. Ray went to lie down and rest on his bed. When he put his hand under his pillow to get some sleep, he felt a piece of paper. He pulled out the piece of paper which read, "Meet me at the arena at 9 o'clock. Ray started to wonder who had left the message. He could only think that it had to be someone from the academy. Then one thought came to his mind, pure blood. Perhaps this was a trap set up by them. Although Wilfred had told Ray to come to him if anything like this happened, Ray chose not to. Ray wasn't afraid, though. Ray estimated that his current strength was probably on par with anyone they could hire as a bodyguard for him. It was nearly time for the meeting at 9 p.m. There were guards stationed outside the arena, but it was easy for Ray to avoid detection and sneak in. When he finally arrived at the arena, the field was completely empty. The guards were only stationed on the outside. There was not a soul inside. Ray eventually went down to the center of the arena and waited. Then a voice was heard. "I finally get to speak to you," he said. As Ray turned around, he recognized it was Jack, the #1 ranked student in the academy. As Ray turned around, he could see Jack standing there. Jack didn't wear much armor. He had a leather sleeveless vest on and just some standard trousers. But the one thing that did stand out on Jack was the giant great sword he held on his back. It looked like it had been carved from a giant magical beast tooth. The sword was the same size as Jack himself. Ray could tell that Jack wasn't like the other students. His dragon eyes were telling him differently. While most Master Knights were able to control their aura and ki, making it hard for Ray to tell how strong they were, Jack was just letting all of the energy flow out of him, and currently, it was running wild. I finally get to meet you. It's a shame that the two of us didn't get matched up together, which means this may be the only chance we get to fight. Jack then pulled his great sword from his back. The giant sword looked weightless in Jack's hand. So, is that why you sent that note? So, the two of us would battle? You're not a member of Pure Blood, are you? Although Ray asked these questions, he didn't expect Jack to admit it. Ray wanted to see if Jack's reaction would change at the mention of Pure Blood. No, what note? I simply spotted you and decided to follow. What a perfect place you chose to have our showdown. Ray was then slightly confused. If Jack didn't send that note, then that meant someone else did. Enough talking, let's go. Jack suddenly charged in towards Ray. As Jack's giant great sword came down, Ray infused his ki into his gauntlets. The two of them clashed, sending waves of power through the arena. I knew you were strong, Jack exclaimed, the excitement in his eyes growing with each passing moment. Jack had expected the great sword to slice right through the gauntlets, or even for Ray to have dodged. Instead, he decided to take it head-on. Ray felt the strength behind Jack's attack and thought it felt like that of the Minotaur. The two were currently in a stalemate of power with neither one budging. But then, something caught Ray's eye. Behind Jack, a dark figure appeared. It was fully dressed in black beast armor, but one thing stood out: the red mask. Yes, Ray shouted. Now, with the extra mana supplementing his ki, he threw the giant blade with Jack up to one side and went straight for the man in the red mask. Ray threw a fist out at the man with all his extra ki. The red mask man brought out a spear using the pole to block the attack. The pole bent backwards, but just when it looked like it was about to give. It bounced back, reflecting the force back onto Ray. Ray was sent flying backwards around 10 feet. Ray then dug his hand, using his fingertips into the ground to try to stop the momentum. Still, he carried on being dragged back a few feet until he eventually stopped. What in the... Ray was taken aback. He thought in his current state, there wouldn't be many people who could take the full force of his punch like that. Then the red masked man dashed towards Ray with the spear to finish him off. But before the red masked man could even move a few feet, a giant great sword came smashing down into the ground, stopping the red masked man. What are you doing getting in the way of my fight? Jack demanded. He then pointed his great sword at the red masked man's head. You look strong. Fight me. The red masked man tried moving around Jack, trying to get to Ray. He would strike with his spear, making Jack block, then try to maneuver around him, but Jack was strong. He wasn't going to let the red masked man go that easy. Every time the masked man would move, Jack would swing his great sword, blocking the red man's path. The red masked man then made a signal with his hand. Suddenly, 5 men in the red masks descended into the arena around Ray. While the leader was preoccupied with Jack, the other 5 men charged at Ray. Jack and the leader resumed their fight. Despite Jack's power and accuracy with his sword, the leader was always one step ahead of him, and Jack's strikes would miss the leader by a few inches. The leader was simply too fast for Jack. Then when the leader saw an opening, he went for a stab with his spear. As the tip of the spear hit Jack's body, the spear started to bend. You really think you can hurt me? Jack patronized as he took another swing at the leader. The leader jumped back a few steps. Jack wasn't going to give the leader any time to rest. With Jack's ki-reinforced body, he had nothing to worry about. He could swing as he wished, knowing he wouldn't get hurt. Jack had an abnormal amount of ki from a young age. The problem was he was never able to control it. Unlike others, Jack wasn't able to control his ki to specific parts of his body or into the weapons he used. Instead, his ki was always active all around his body. Any other kid with this amount of ki from a young age would have died, but Jack's body was one of a kind. Jack took another swing at the leader. This time, it was too fast for the leader to avoid. The leader lifted up his spear, as he did against Ray. Unlike with Ray, the leader was sent flying through the air. The momentum from Jack's strike propelled the leader skidding across the ground until he crashed into the arena walls. The leader was confused. The spear had an ability to reflect any ki back onto the user attacking it. This was why it was so effective on Ray. Why didn't it work on Jack? The leader thought. This was because Jack never used any ki in his strikes in the first place. He didn't know how to. As the leader stood up, his face mask started to crumble and pieces started to fall on the ground. Jack could see the man's face he had been fighting. "Killer!" Jack exclaimed. Killer stood up from the ground. With his mask broken, there was no longer any need to continue wearing it. He ripped off the remainder of the mask and threw it to the ground. Jack started to laugh out loud. "Looks like you hid your real strength this whole time," Jack said. Killer was currently ranked second in the academy, while Jack was number 1. Although their positions seemed close on the leaderboard, in reality to the academy, the two were very far apart in terms of power. In the few matches they had with each other, Jack would come out as the clear winner. But right now, Killer had shown Jack skills he had never seen before. Ray was currently injured quite badly. His fang-bore armor had been completely destroyed by the blowback from the spear, and his whole body was damaged. The mana Ray used would take a while to come regenerate, so all he could do was use his normal amount of ki. He was currently facing 5 opponents at the same time, while damaged, and with no chest armor. The 5 Ray was currently facing weren't as strong as the leader. If Ray had to face all 6 of them at the same time, it would have been a big struggle. Ray thought to himself it was lucky that Jack was here and keeping the leader busy. Although Jack originally came here looking for trouble, he was now helping Ray greatly. Ray would owe the man one in the future. Ray was currently demonstrating amazing footwork, avoiding his opponent's strikes, blending in with the shadows, and then attacking them from behind. Ray was doing just enough to keep them all busy and not get hurt back. The Black Sash Knight skills truly came in handy at nighttime, and at a time like this. What Ray needed more than anything right now was time. His mana would eventually return, and in doing so would allow him to take out these small fries. Killer pulled out a small glass test tube. The glass tube had a purple liquid flowing inside of it. Killer took a quick glance at Jack before deciding to drink the purple liquid. Jack thought nothing of it, and thought it was most likely a healing potion created by alchemy. There were many types of potions created using beast crystals and rare plants. Although none was as useful as Mage's healing magic, some of them had special effects such as not allowing the user to feel pain and giving the user confidence. Other than that, it didn't really do much. Jack went charging in towards Killer, hoping to finish him off with one more strike. Despite his current engagement with the 5 red masked men, Ray had been taking quick glances from the corner of his eye to spectate the 2 battle. When he saw the purple liquid, he had a bad feeling. As soon as Killer took the purple liquid, his aura changed. It got 3 times as strong, and not only that, it went from yellow to a purple mix. It was the Shadow Plague. "Wait!" Ray shouted at Jack. Jack heard Ray shout from the other side of the arena. He was wondering what Ray was so worried about. Jack continued to charge in. He knew that Killer wasn't able to hurt his body, so what did he have to worry about? As he got closer, though his instincts were telling him to back away. At the last second, Jack decided to jump back. A swing from Killer's spear managed to scratch the surface of Jack's skin, causing him to bleed. For the first time in a long time, Jack was shedding blood. Ray was struggling to think of what to do. The opponents right now were too strong for Noir to fight, and Jack might attack the beast thinking it was on the enemy's side. Ray had gained 5 mana points back in total. It wasn't enough to take out the 5 in Killer, but he needed to do something fast. Suddenly, Ray's mana points dropped down to 0. His gauntlet started to turn a slight, ice blue chill color. Frost was starting to form on parts of the gloves. A red-masked man swung his blade at Ray. Ray then grabbed the blade. Ice started to form surrounding the whole blade, and then snapped. The blade broke in half. Ray punched the man in the stomach. Ray had currently used the rest of his mana points to infuse the ice attribute into his weapons. The situation between Killer and Jack was now reversed. Jack was doing his best to avoid each and every strike. Luckily for him, his weapon was very durable, managing to block the spear. The attacks that Jack wasn't able to block started to leave cuts on his skin. Slowly, Jack was starting to get worn down. "Not so strong now, are you, Jack?" Killer berated. Jack was enraged by the comment. He wasn't used to being on the defensive in a fight, and it wasn't really working for him. He then chose to attack back. With each strike Jack threw, it was returned with a stab by the spear. After 5 minutes of this, Jack had punctures all over his body. Blood was oozing out from him from all over. "I'm amazed you can still stand, but this is the end." Killer gathered his ki for one last strike, aiming straight for Jack's head. The attack was too fast for Jack to move. When the blade was about to pierce his head, a hand reached out and grabbed the spear. "How did you—" Killer was shocked to see Ray come over here. Killer looked at his men to the side and could see they all had been beaten. While Jack was busy fighting, Ray managed to defeat the 5 men using the ice attribute. He knew he wouldn't have enough strength after, but that didn't matter. Ray had the skill mana drain. He then went over to each of the 5 men on the ground and started to absorb their mana. Ray not only got his mana back, but he was able to nearly double his original mana pool. The spear started to freeze. Killer quickly pulled it back. Jack started to collapse, and as he was just about to hit the floor, he landed on a soft, furry body. More had been summoned and took Jack to the edge of the arena. "Now it's my turn." Jack was currently at the edge of the arena, slumped down with his back up against the wall. He wasn't passed out, but was badly hurt, keeping an eye on Ray fighting Killer. He had never been this hurt in his life before. He was wondering what on earth that purple liquid Killer took was. That was the turning point of their battle. Right now, though, there wasn't much he could do, but hope Ray was strong enough to beat him. Although Ray had gotten some of his mana back, he was still struggling in the fight against Killer. He was still badly injured from before. Ray thought hard about it, until he came to a conclusion. Ray figured out the trick to the spear. There was an advanced beast called the spider crab. The spider crab's shell was special. It had the ability to bounce back attacks of certain level. Killer's spear was made from the advanced beast of the spider crab. Ray was struggling. He could attack, but because of the weapon, he wasn't able to put any ki into his attacks. If he did, it would only recoil back onto himself like before. Killer's weapon was not only a higher tier than Ray's, but also Killer was able to put his ki into the spear. Although elemental attacks would work, without ki or mana, they were basically useless. The only thing that was keeping Ray in the battle currently was his footwork from the black sash training and his hand-to-hand combat skills learned from the old man. Ray's chest was currently exposed due to the damage he took. He no longer had the fangbore armor. The attacks were coming in fierce and fast like a snake, but Ray would knock each one away. Jack was amazed. Not only was Ray strong physically, but he was also skilled. Damn it, if I had dealt with him early on, it wouldn't have been a problem. It looks like his speed, his power, everything is doubled. Ray thought to himself. Ray wished right now he had some of his dragon skills. With the fire and ice attribute at most, he could transfer it to what he was wearing. He wasn't able to cast a fireball or an ice ball. This way he could create a diversion. As a spear attack came down on Ray, he went to uppercut the spear as hard as he could without using any ki. It was the only thing he could do. As the two weapons collided, Ray could hear a cracking sound in his gauntlets. Ray had more strength than the average human. Even without ki, he would be able to match some students in terms of raw power, but the main problem right now was his intermediate gauntlets weren't good enough to go up against an advanced tier weapon. When Ray was starting to run out of ideas, a voice sounded from behind. "Here," Jack said as he barely stood up holding his great sword. Jack then threw the great sword in the air towards Ray. Ray leapt up and caught the weapon. "You need a better weapon, right? Well, you can borrow my baby girl for a little while." Jack had been watching Ray for a while now. When he saw Ray's gauntlets nearly break, he knew he needed to help out somehow. Jack was reluctant to give the weapon to Ray. There weren't many that could wield it for its huge size and weight. But if there was anyone who had a chance, it was Ray. Ray happily took the great sword from Jack and went on the attack against Killer. The sword was indeed heavy for Ray, forcing him to use 2 hands to swing the thing. The two weapons clashed with thunderous roars, sending out shockwaves throughout the arena. The weapon Jack had lent Ray was the same tier. The two of them were even in terms of power. Ray knew he needed to do something to turn the tide. Ray gripped the great sword in his right hand. It was going to take all of his power to hold it with one hand and use it properly. A spear strike came stabbing towards Ray's head. He moved to the side and grabbed the spear with his left hand. Ray used the remainder of his mana to freeze his hand with the spear. Ice started to not only cover the spear, but Ray's entire left arm as well. The spear's special skill had activated recoiling the damage back to Ray. It was risky. If Killer had the strength to move the spear, there was a chance Ray could lose his arm. With Ray's right arm, he went to swing the great sword, His veins were bulging out of his arm as he gathered every ounce of strength he had. The great sword weighed a ton, and it took all of his strength to swing with one arm. He had used all of his mana and ki on the ice attribute. So, he had to finish Killer with his pure strength. Killer was reluctant to let go of the spear, but he knew if he didn't, he'd be a goner. As the great sword came closer to his head, he finally decided he had to let go and escape, but when he tried to pull away, the ice had already started to reach Killer's hand, causing him to be stuck to the spear. The great sword sliced right in between Killer's head and shoulders, cutting his head off. Ray was sweating hard. His heart was beating fast. Too many times now, he had been in a life or death situation. His hand was still stuck frozen to the spear. Ray walked over to Killer's body and placed his hand on Killer's chest. Mana drain. Was it because of the shadow plague? Ray thought. After Killer had absorbed the purple liquid, his aura changed from yellow to a purple, just like the Dark Guild members. Are Pure Blood and the Dark Guild related to the shadow plague somehow? Then another notification sound came up. It seemed like to Ray, whenever he got out of life or death situation, he unlocked a new skill. Maybe the system was rewarding him for that. Ray thought back to all the situations so far. When he defeated the Black Wolf, when he fought the Dark Guild members, when he fought the Minotaur, and now when he fought against the Pure Blood member. But that couldn't be right, because there was one instance where Ray didn't receive a skill. The first time he fought Pure Blood with Gary against Lancey. If that was the case, that situation was just as tough as this one. Yet he didn't receive a skill at that time. Ray then quickly went to search for Killer to see if he had anything on him. Then Ray managed to find an extra vial of purple liquid in a small glass test tube. Ray held the test tube up with his right hand. Ray's left arm was still currently frozen solid. He needed to wait for his mana to come back to activate his fire attribute and melt the ice away. As it was, Ray's mana returned at a rate of 1 point for every 5 minutes that passed. If he sat down and focused, this rate could increase to 1 mana point per minute. Ray sat down and started to focus in order to get his mana points back. As he did, he went to look at the new skill he had obtained. The skill Transform allowed Ray to change his appearance. Although Ray was originally happy when he first saw this, his opinion quickly changed when he read the description. Ray saw that the description had many restrictions. Ray would only be able to transform his appearance and not alter any of the features on his body. What this basically meant was he could change his face to appear as another person in skin color, but nothing else. Not only that, but the skill required him to maintain an output mana, unlike his dragon eyes. While using the skill Transform, it would use up 5 mana points per hour of transformation. Although this skill was pretty much useless for battle, Ray thought of other ways he could use this skill in the future. Ray then thought about the purple vial he had obtained. It seemed to contain the essence of the shadow plague. It not only infected Killer, but also made him stronger. Ray was wondering if he would be able to give the vial to someone who knew what to do with it. He would have to wait until he was out of the academy. There were more members of Pure Blood than the academy originally thought, and it was even worse now that perhaps it was all linked to the shadow plague somehow. If he gave it to someone in the academy, it would probably disappear without Ray ever finding out what it was. Finally, Ray had restored enough mana points to activate the fire attribute into his right gauntlet. He then took it to his left arm and started to thaw out his arm until it was completely free to move again. After his arm was completely thawed out, Ray went to each of the bodies on the floor and started to burn them until there was nothing left but ashes. Ray was afraid that if he left the place and left the bodies there, someone would find them and it would only cause him more problems. Ray didn't come out of the fight empty-handed, though. He got to keep the spear that Killer used. It was an advanced tier weapon with the ability to reflect low magic spells and ki. It was a shame that Ray didn't really fight with a spear. He thought about giving it to Dan, but then the Pure Blood members would target Dan for having it. For now, he would just have to keep it somewhere safe for the time being. Ray then picked up the great sword and started walking over towards Jack. Jack was bloody all over and needed medical help soon. "Here you go," Ray said as he handed the weapon back to Jack. "Thank you for letting me borrow it." "No problem. So you're a mage then?" Jack said. Jack had seen Ray freeze the spear as well as burn the bodies. Jack was right to think that Ray was a mage, but he had never heard of a mage that could fight as well as Ray and also perform magic. It took mages years to learn how to use their magic properly, so they didn't have time to focus on fighting skills unless they were hundreds of years old. I hope I don't have to explain that it's important that you keep this a secret from everyone. Ray asked, "Are you crazy? You saved my life. I owe you at least that." Jack had been brought up in a well-off noble family, but they weren't like others. His father had worked up from a foot soldier and eventually became a general for the Allier Kingdom, while his mother was an A-ranked adventurer. The two of them brought up Jack well and taught him to always pay back those that you owe a favor to. And right now, Jack owed Ray his life. Jack thought if Ray ever needed him to risk his life for something, he would do so without hesitation. Jack saw something special in Ray and thought that this man would soon change the world, and he wanted to be a part of it. Jack then stuck his great sword down and tried his best to get down on one knee. "I, Jack Lee, owe my life to my savior. I promise if there's anything you ever need help with in the future, I will serve you at the risk of my own life." Ray liked people like Jack. They were honest and straightforward. Ray then summoned Noir and asked for both of them to get on her. "You can also summon a beast. I was a fool to think I could beat you right now." Jack was happy to find out that there were still many strong people in this world. He had long grown bored of the academy. He felt like following Ray would get him in even more interesting scenarios, allowing him to fight strong opponents like he did today. Ray dropped off Jack at the hospital so they could heal his wounds in time for the match tomorrow. Jack then remembered that Ray was also seriously injured by Killer. "Aren't you going to come in too?" Jack asked. Ray then showed his chest there was a mark from the impact, but right now there was nothing there. "My body is special, so don't worry about it. I'll be fine by tomorrow." After leaving Jack at the hospital, Ray started to walk towards his room. He was debating whether he should tell Wilfred of the events that occurred today. The problem was there were too many people Ray couldn't trust. Pure Blood was an organization that just disagreed with the prophecy, but finding out the Shadow Plague is involved made everything a lot more serious. The Shadow had already infiltrated Avrian, and they didn't even know it. It could only mean that the people at the top were responsible, either a Master Knight or an Elder. Ray had decided to wake up earlier than usual today. The others had come back later than him and were out all night training. They needed good rest for the fights that they had in front of them. Meanwhile, Ray knew he had no opponent, meaning there was nothing for him to worry about. Ray was originally meant to go up against Killer. Well, with Killer now being a pile of ashes, that was impossible. Ray's injuries had healed up through the night, but his equipment was still in poor condition. Ray decided to head down to the blacksmith to see if there was anything he could do. After entering the shop, this time to the owner was nicer than ever to Ray. As soon as Ray entered, the owner bowed down and greeted him, something he had never done before. It frightened Ray to think what Slivia must have done to him. It also made him realize that her family must hold great power and sway throughout the kingdom to even have influence in the academy. "Is there any way you can fix this?" Ray took a single right pictorial piece and a bunch of other shattered pieces and laid them out on the table. The owner rubbed his glasses to see if he was seeing things. "So you must be joking. This thing is beyond repair. Although we did just get this new armadillo advanced chess piece, if you like a new one." The owner couldn't help but think what on earth Ray had done to get his equipment in a state like this. The fang boar piece wasn't weak. Even a cannon shot wouldn't have damaged it this badly. The owner grew even more suspicious of Ray. The owner shuffled over to the showcase against the right wall of the shop to take out the armadillo chess piece and let Ray examine it. The shelves holding armor on the side wall were currently encased in reinforced glass, so no one would be able to steal the highly valued armors, and if someone did manage to break the glass, steel bars would immediately drop down from the ceiling. The armadillo piece had a beautiful orange shine with cone-shaped interlocking scales. It had been refined down to give it a sturdy, strong defense. The piece looked nice, and Ray was due for an upgrade on his equipment. As Ray got closer to the piece, he could see the price tag, 10,000 coins. Ray currently held 10 intermediate crystals, so he would be able to trade for the Amor piece, but a student couldn't get their hands on that much coin or that many crystals. The owner also knew Ray was a student of Avrian Academy and had already suspected him once of stealing basic tier crystals. If he was suddenly to pull out 10, the owner would have a heart attack. "It's okay, I can never afford that," Ray said. The owner smiled. He knew that the student in front of him had no way of paying for the equipment. The owner simply wanted to boast about the new piece of armor that had come in. "Could you fix these for me then?" Ray asked as he placed his 2 gauntlets on the table. The owner took a good look at them, again wondering what Ray had been through to get the gauntlets in this type of condition. "It will take me a while, but I think I can work on it," the owner replied. Ray was happy. The gauntlets were a gift from the old man. He currently didn't have his own set, and gauntlets were a rare item, so the shop didn't sell any. He relied on the gauntlets a lot these days, since he mainly used martial arts to fight rather than his sword. Ideally, he would have loved for Killer to have dropped a sword instead of spear. The spear was currently useless to him and was hidden under Ray's bed with a whole load of other things. Ray currently didn't have anywhere to put them, so this was his only option. Ray could buy a spatial manipulation bag, but they costed a fortune. A tier 10 mage had to inscribe the bag with a specific advanced tier crystal. So not only were they expensive, but also rare. Ray decided to go for a walk around the academy while waiting for his gauntlets to be repaired. While walking around, he saw one of the red sash squires giving a tour of the academy to a crowd of people. The crowd was filled with parents, nobles, merchants, and even adventurers. And further down the hall, we have the blacksmithing area. Inside the blacksmithing area, there is a shop where students are able to buy and sell equipment. It is also a space used by students of the blacksmithing club who wish to learn how to forge beast equipment. The Red Squire Knight said as he walked past. As the nobles walked past Ray, they couldn't help but start to whisper to themselves, "Isn't that the red-haired boy who was in the tournament?" "Yes, I think you're right. How scary." Ray walked past the crowd of people and decided to ignore them. As he walked past, he noticed the adventurers carrying really nice equipment. The upside of being an adventurer was you often went out on quests to slay magical beasts, giving you many opportunities to obtain strong crystal cores. Then a light bulb moment came to Ray's mind as he saw the adventurers walk past. Ray quickly rushed back to his room and went looking under his bed. Everyone else had already left the room in preparation for their upcoming match, which was perfect for Ray. Underneath Ray's bed, he pulled a small chest, and with the touch of his finger, the chest unlocked. The chest was inscribed with magic, so only the user was allowed to open the chest. Of course, if you had greater key or magic than the spell inscribed, someone could break it. Ray opened the chest and took out the 10 intermediate beast crystals. He went over to the girl's side of the room, where they had a long, full body mirror. Suddenly, a white mist surrounded Ray's entire body. Then slowly the mist started to disappear. Out of the mist came a black-haired, handsome man wearing all sorts of high-end beast gear. Although Ray currently looked impressive and looked like a strong adventurer, everything was currently an illusion created from his skill, Transform. The transformation skill currently took 5 mana points for every hour Ray was fully transformed. Ray currently had a total of 43 mana points. This meant at the moment, he could stay in his current form for around another 8 hours. This was, of course, as long as he didn't have to fight using this form, as that would also take up additional mana. Ray looked at himself in the mirror one more time before heading off. Although he didn't really have any interest in humans, he thought he had done a damn good job creating a handsome one using his skill transform. After leaving the room with his 10 crystals in hand, he decided to head back to the blacksmith shop. While walking through the halls, many of the female students couldn't help but look his way. Ray was right. He had created one of the most handsome men to walk the earth. The females and even male students couldn't help but stare in admiration. Not only that, the equipment he was wearing screamed high-quality beast gear. But unknown to them, it was all an illusion. Ray wasn't used to the friendly treatment. Students would greet him in the hallway and ask him if there was anything he needed. It was completely different from when he was Ray. This world is quick to judge. Just a simple change in appearance, and their actions and speech toward me changed so drastically. Ray thought that the students were hypocritical. These very same students ignored him and shunned him just cause of his red hair. Finally, after arriving at the blacksmith shop, Ray opened the door and was happily greeted by the owner. "So even you treat me differently?" Ray mumbled. Sorry, what was that, sir? Nothing. I'm looking for the best chest piece armor you have. As soon as the owner saw Ray walk in, his eyes lit up with gold. From the equipment alone that the adventurer was wearing, he knew this man was a big spender. The owner took Ray to the orange armadillo chest piece. Ray tried on the chest piece, and straight away, he could feel the quality in the armor. Not only was it strong, but it was flexible, allowing him to have a free range of movement when fighting. I'll take it, Ray said. And how will you be paying for that, sir? The blacksmith asked with a bit too much enthusiasm. Will this be okay? Ray said as he put 10 intermediate beast crystals out on the table. That's perfect. The owner quickly put the crystals away and was happy for Ray to walk out with the armadillo chess piece. Just as Ray was about to leave, he heard the bell chime on the door, signaling that another person had entered the shop. In walked a beautiful silver-haired girl with her armor in a blue and white pattern. She carried a giant shield on her back. Slivia, Ray called out to her. Slivia looked at the man who had just called out her name. After looking at the man up and down for a good few seconds, she realized she had no recollection of the man who called out to her. Not wanting to be rude, Slivia walked up to the man and bowed down. Forgive me, sir, but how do you know my name? Slivia was being extra polite. Her family had relations with many people who she had only seen when she was young. The man in front of her looked like an accomplished adventurer, so she thought it would be best for her to mind her manners. Ray had realized the grave mistake that he had just committed and needed to think of something fast. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm here because of the Avrian tournament. Of course, I would know one of the contestants participating in today's matches, Ray said as he nervously smiled. Slivia's instinct was telling her something was off. Slivia hadn't fought in the opening round, meaning no one should know what she looked like. Slivia decided to play along for the time being, as she remembered Sir Kay's warning. The person in front of her might be a member of pure blood. I hope I can put on a good show for you, she said as she smiled and went over to the counter. Slivia was currently picking up a new single-handed sword. Ray took a look and could tell it was an upgrade from her last weapon. She was currently holding a shark fin tiger beast blade. It was a curved sharp blade with a blue finish on the back. It matched her outfit well. Slivia picked up the blade and started to walk back out the door. Is that an advanced tier weapon you are carrying? Ray asked. Slivia nodded. My brothers gifted me the crystal core for my battle today. Ray's feelings were currently conflicted. Slivia had helped him out in the past many times, and right now, he wanted to help her out, but he didn't know how. The spear that Ray received from Killer was also an advanced tier weapon, but even Killer wasn't able to put a scratch on Jack's body until he drank the purple liquid, increasing his ki. Ray knew that Slivia didn't have a large amount of ki. She always used her brain to fight her enemies, but against an opponent like Jack, that wasn't going to help her. It was the worst matchup for her. Your opponent Jack is strong, Ray said. His body will feel like it's almost impenetrable. Although your weapon is strong, it won't be enough against Jack. You must find another way. This was all Ray could do to help out Slivia. Ray himself didn't know how he could be of help to her. All he could do was warn her and let her think of something. Slivia was surprised to find out that the person in front of her was speaking as if he had fought against Jack himself before, but she thought what the man was currently saying had to be impossible. She currently had an advanced tier weapon, the only person out of all the second years to have one. It was hard for her to imagine anyone having a body strong enough body to withstand striking from one. For some reason, though, she felt like the man standing in front of her wasn't lying. What's your name? Slivia asked. Ray had thought about this for a while if he ever needed to use an alias. He missed his old name. The name is Ness. Slivia couldn't help but think that the name Ness sounded made up, but who knew in today's day and age? Also, adventurers would often give themselves nicknames to sound more menacing. I know Ness. You said you were here to watch the tournament, right? Well, why don't we both go together? Slivia offered as she smiled. Sure, why not? Ray replied. Ray was heading there now anyway. All he needed to do was find a time to split apart from Slivia and came back later. Slivia and Ray walked down the street to the arena together, and while the two of them did, they talked about many things. Slivia asked what it was like being an adventurer. Although Ray had no clue, he easily made up stories of lands that he had seen when he was a dragon. The description he gave of places were realistic because he had actually seen them before. Suddenly, In front of the two of them, a commotion was happening. Many knights were running over to a certain direction, and screams and shouts could be heard. Slivia looked concerned and said, "Something must have happened. We still have time, let's go check it out." Slivia and Ray quickly dashed over to the direction the knights were heading in. As they continued to follow the knights, the noise from the crowd grew louder. When they arrived finally, a crowd of people and knights had gathered around a building which had caught on fire. Slivia went to ask one of the people from the crowd what had happened. "What's going on here?" "It's the inn." Apparently, there was a shipment of crystals one of the merchants was carrying in a carriage nearby. All of a sudden, the carriage exploded and the inn caught on fire. Slivia and Ray rushed in through the crowd of people to get closer to the building. There were many knights covered in smoke and black charcoal who were either tending to or carrying the injured. Just then, a knight went up to the squad leader to report the situation. "Sir, we've done the best we can for now. The crystals are acting like some sort of fuel. It's caused the fire to get out of hand. It's too strong for our men to enter. Are there any more people inside?" "A lady, sir. She keeps saying she can't find her 2 children. Get a master knight here straight away. Ask around if there are any mages that can perform ice or water magic. Heck, even a fire mage would do." Slivia and Ray had overheard the conversation between the knights. "I have to do something," Slivia said as she bit her lip. "You can't. If you go in like that, your skin will burn off. But if I don't, they'll die." Slivia felt helpless. If only she could perform magic like her family members, she could do something right now. Ray scanned the building with his dragon eyes. He could see the children were in the top right corner of a room. The fire was slowly creeping up. It was clear that if something wasn't done soon, the children would die. The situation brought up bad memories for Ray. When he was just a child, someone had set his house on fire and tried to murder him and his parents. If it wasn't for his mother at the time, then they wouldn't have been able to control the fire. Ray started walking towards the building. "What are you doing? You said yourself you'll die in there." "Don't worry. I know a little bit of ice magic," Ray said as he dashed and past the crowd of people. Slivia was confused. To her, Ness looked like your standard swordsman. Even the gear he was wearing said he was. Mages often wore normal clothes that increased their magical strength. Slivia couldn't help but think that Ness was just putting on a brave act. The knights saw Ray try to approach the burning building and tried to stop him, but Ray easily avoided them and quickly entered the house. Although Ray didn't have any magical spells, he did have his ice attribute. Right now, he was spreading his ki around his body, causing it to keep his body nice and cool. Ray had to act fast, though. With the transformation and use of ki, his mana would go down faster. With Ray's dragon eyes, he was able to locate the room the children were in fast. If it was anyone else, they would have had to search each and every room, but Ray knew exactly the right place to go. He finally found 2 kids who looked to be around the age of 5, and their energy was weak. Ray quickly grabbed the 2 kids and jumped out of a window nearby. Ray landed just outside the building with the 2 children in his hands. Steam was emitting from Ray's body as the fire and ice were constantly battling each other. A knight quickly came and took the 2 children out of Ray's hand. The crowd of people cheered as they saw the brave, handsome warrior save the 2 children. Slivia was smiling brighter than ever. Just when Slivia was about to approach Ness and see if he was okay, suddenly Ness ran away and disappeared from the crowd. The crowd couldn't help but talk about the mysterious stranger. "He ran away. I guess he must have just been shy. Can you believe what he just did?" Slivia just stood there thinking, who was that guy? Originally, she thought he might have been a member of Pure Blood or the Dark Guild, but she found it hard to believe someone who would risk their life like that would join such evil organizations. Ray had currently run to the top of one of the buildings out of sight. His mana had been completely depleted and his form had changed back to normal. That was a close one. As Ray started to meditate, a notification sound was heard. As Ray read the notification and closed it, another one popped up. Through this random chance of events, Ray happened to learn 2 new skills, but that wasn't what Ray was really excited about. Finally, Ray thought he had found the answer to unlocking his dragon skills back. Slivia was currently still stood outside the inn. It was burning more furiously than before, and if the knights didn't do anything about it, soon it would start to spread to the other buildings. "Bring more water," a knight shouted. The knights had gathered plenty of water, but it simply wasn't enough. They had managed to carry over large containers filled with gallons of water, but had no machinery to dispense the water onto the inn. A master knight was strong enough to possibly lift the gallons of containers and jump up just high enough to pour it down, but it would take a while longer before they reached the building. This is getting really out of hand, Slivia thought to herself. Just then the water out of all the containers started to lift into the air. The water started swirling around as if it was alive, like a snake. "Depants," a male's voice said. The water quickly flew to the inn and burst, managing to subdue most of the fire. As Slivia turned around, she saw 4 noblemen standing there with their hands out. Each of them had silver hair and wore blue and white clothing. "Brothers," Slivia shouted. Slivia's 4 brothers continued to cast magic spells, eventually dispelling all the fire. The crowd cheered at the sight of the mages and were impressed at what they had seen. The knights quickly came over to thank them for their help. Once that was all done, with the tallest and eldest of the brothers, Matthew, walked over to Slivia. "It's been a long time, little sister," Matthew said as he rubbed her head. Ray was currently sitting down on a roof of a building not far from the arena. He still had a couple of hours before the event started, so there was no rush. Although he didn't know who was fighting first, everyone was required to come to the arena at the same time. Ray looked at the 2 skills he had just obtained. The first skill was called Mana Share. It was a skill that was the complete opposite of Mana Steal. While Mana Steal stole the key and mana from creatures and people, Mana Share gave it to them. As a dragon son would often use this skill on his weaker friends or creatures that were dying. The thing was his mana back then was nearly unlimited, while right now, Ray didn't have much. Ray thought this skill would be useful if he wanted to change the human race and fight the Shadow Plague. Then he needed an army and not the current one that was under control of the Alur Kingdom. The kingdom was already a mess without them realizing it. There was no way to tell who wouldn't betray them and who wouldn't. The Dark Guild and Pure Blood members were already deeply rooted at the top. What Ray needed was dedicated followers, an army of his own. This skill would prove incredibly useful in the future when needing powerful allies. The second skill he had obtained was Endless Void. Just when Ray was struggling to think of where to put his items, the perfect skill came right in front of him. It was as if the system was watching him from above. Endless Void was a separate space that only Ray had access to. Just like the name stated, it was endless. This meant he would be able to store anything he wanted in this space and pull it out when he wanted to. Ray realized that there was a problem with using his second identity nest. A lot of the public had seen him wearing the armor he had just bought, which meant while Ray was in the academy, he wouldn't be able to wear the armor. Ray thought the best thing to do would be to get 2 sets of equipment. One set for Ness, where he could be the rich, great, powerful adventurer who didn't need to hold back or hide his abilities, and one set for the student Ray, who was one of the best knights at Avrian Academy. After obtaining these 2 skills, though, Ray thought back to the connections between all these events. What made the system say task complete? All of them had one thing in common. Ray had saved a human life. Ray, of course, wasn't sure about this theory, but it was the only thing that made sense so far. The current 2 skills he had obtained had nothing to do with fighting magical beasts, but there were a few things that were troubling him. The first time he had unlocked a skill, he saved Gary and Amy in the forest. If he had saved 2 people back then, why didn't he receive 2 skills? There was also the time he had defeated the Minotaur. He had protected Gary, Monk, and Jasmine, yet only received 1 skill. Ray looked back at all the events that led him to learn skills, and when he shouldn't have. Gary with the Black Wolf, the old man with the Dark Guild, Jasmine and the others with the Minotaur, Jack with the Pure Blood members, and the 2 kids from the fire. If the system truly gave him a skill every time he saved a life, then he should have got 1 for Amy with the Wolf, Gary when he fought against Monk, 2 more skills against the Minotaur, and when he fought against Pure Blood with Gary. Then it hit him. Perhaps the system only granted a skill for every life you had saved and didn't count it if it was multiple times. Gary had already been saved when he was younger, so he no longer got any skills from it. With the other incidents that weren't related to Gary, Ray had a theory about those too. While fighting the Minotaur, Monk was the least injured out of all of them. Maybe Monk's life wasn't saved that day, but only Jasmine's. Of course, right now, these were all theories running through his head. Ray wanted to test this theory as soon as possible. If it was true, finally he would be closer to getting his powers back. The problem was it wasn't like someone was in a near-death situation every day that Ray could stop. He would just have to wait until the next opportunity to come up. To see if it was true,